Today I'm going to answer whether or not you should wait for your ex to contact you first in the post-breakup period. Now, in my opinion, I think it's far more important for you to reach out to an ex first with the right frame of mind. Now, often the expectation that your success during the post-breakup process is reliant on an ex showing an extreme interest in you. In my opinion, that's overrated, and it really doesn't line up with what we see in the field. In this in-depth guide, you're going to learn why getting into the right frame of mind before you talk to your ex is so important, why what matters isn't who starts the conversation but who ends it, what research during the no contact rule has taught us about exes reaching out first, why my team and I believe you reaching out first is almost always the right move. So let's begin. Let's get right into it. So let's talk about the importance of getting into the right frame of mind. Take a look at this graphic. I'm going to put it up on your screen right now. This is called the value ladder and is essentially a bird's eye view of the process we teach to our clients, assuming they want their exes back. Now, if this isn't something you're interested in, then I still urge you to pay attention to what I'm about to say next. Everything about this graphic operates because of this part right here, the no contact rule. Now, lately, with almost every article I've been writing about, I've talked about how most of the people who enter into our orbit and think they know all about the no contact rule don't really know as much as they think. Take our official definition. The no contact rule refers to a period of time where you cut off all conceivable communication with an ex after a breakup. The intent of this tactic should not be used to make your ex miss you, but instead should be used to rebuild your own life so that you can outgrow your ex. By doing this, the no contact rule can have the added benefit of making an ex miss you. And the important part of that definition that often gets overlooked is this part right here. The intent of this tactic should not be used to make your ex miss you, but instead should be used to rebuild your own life so that you outgrow your ex. Now, from an attachment style perspective, most of our clients tend to veer towards anxious behaviors. They're desperate to get their exes back, think the problem in their relationship is their fault when it usually isn't. They beg, they plead, they have trouble staying disciplined. They just want to solve this breakup problem as soon as possible. One of the interesting patterns I noticed when I would interview success stories is that a good number of them mentioned that they had the right frame of mind before they even talked to their ex. They had outgrown their ex. They've been okay with the fact that their relationship was over. And in some cases, they even felt like they were too good for them. In other words, they had achieved the whole ungettable persona. And I really took this concept to heart. Being in the right frame of mind before you talk to your ex. There's just one problem. What's the right frame of mind? Well, in my view, you need to have something that you care about more than your ex in your life before you talk to them. Now, I like to call this sort of the magnum opus concept, something that gives your life a greater purpose outside of romantic relationships. And really, the no contact rule is the perfect time to begin fermenting this mindset shift. So, what I often tell my personal coaching clients is that they shouldn't even think about reaching out to their ex first until they feel confident they've actually outgrown them. Of course, there's one other stereotypical headwind that I have to face, especially when it comes to dealing with female clients. And that's really the data point of, did your ex text you first? Really, this cuts to the heart of the whole discussion we're having here in this video. Stereotypes, in America at least, have taught us that if a guy or a girl doesn't reach out first, then they aren't really interested in you. Perhaps there's some merit to that when it comes to regular romantic relationships. When you add a breakup into the mix, the question becomes a lot more confusing. It wasn't really until I was introduced to a whole new concept called the Zeigarnik effect that my whole thoughts on who texts who first began to shift. Put simply, the Zeigarnik effect occurs when an activity that has been interrupted may be more readily recalled. It postulates that people remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. To use a direct example, imagine the graphic you're seeing on your screen right now as the natural flow of a conversation. Over time, your satisfaction rises, and then eventually it hits an inevitable point where it drops. Now let's just go ahead and assume this conversation is naturally pleasing. So as it begins, it's not particularly interesting or satisfying, but as more time goes by, as more time becomes invested, eventually the conversation becomes more and more interesting. Of course, nothing great lasts forever, and so eventually, if the conversation is given enough time to stale, it will lose its momentum. But according to the Zeigarnik effect, if you were to end the conversation abruptly right in the middle, right near that high point, it's a lot more likely that your ex is going to remember this conversation better than the one that overstayed its welcome. Essentially, the one where you stayed on the phone for 3 hours talking, ran out of things to talk about, it kind of lost meaning. So what does this mean? Well, in my mind, it suggests that the start of a conversation isn't anywhere near as important as the end. So long as you keep a conversation going, then how it starts isn't what's remembered. The end is. And some other research actually backs this suggestion up. It's called the peak end rule. Now, according to the NN group, the peak end rule is a cognitive bias that impacts how people remember past events. Intense positive or negative moments, the peaks, and the final moments of the experience, the end, are heavily weighted in our mental calculus. The peaks and the ends, that's what we remember. Now, if the start is a peak emotional experience, then yes, your ex will remember that. But how many peak emotional moments happen at the start of a throwaway conversation? Not many. Here's my point. Stop obsessing over who starts a conversation. What matters is who ends it, and that needs to be you. Next, let's talk about the biggest falsity of the no contact rule. Now, part of the reason we're having this discussion on if you should wait for an ex to reach out to you first has to be due to the biggest misconception that we have about the no contact rule. Often, our clients get seduced by internet stories. They read someone does a no contact rule and their ex freaks out and blows up their phone, and wow, the no contact really worked. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does. Stories like that are real. All I'm going to make the argument for is that it's the exception to the rule. In fact, a few years ago, I ran a poll in our private Facebook support group asking participants who had completed the no contact rule if their ex had reached out to them during it. Over 60% of our participants in this poll admitted their exes had not reached out to them at all during no contact. So it seems this story being spun about the no contact rule being this great tool to get an ex to reach out to you first isn't really true. And in my opinion, having you reach out to them first in the post-breakup period has too many advantages not to consider. Now, there are really confluence of factors that led me to a decision on why I think reaching out to your ex is the optimal approach. The no contact rule, the Zeigarnik effect, the peak end rule, you being in the driver's seat, preparation, all of these are huge advantages to you reaching out first. Let's go down the list one by one and explain why I consider them to be advantages. So let's first start with the no contact rule. Now, usually if you're doing a no contact rule on your ex, they could hold some resentment and not want to reach out to you, so you kind of have no choice but to be the one to reach out to them first. Additionally, the no contact rule really helps with getting you into that mindset that you need to be in before you reach out to them, which is outgrowing them. Then we, of course, have the Zeigarnik effect and the peak end rule. Now, as I stated earlier, I believe what matters in today's day and age when it comes to dating isn't who reaches out to who first, but who ends the conversation first. Adding another layer, when you end a conversation actually matters. Doing so at a peak moment during a conversation creates a long-lasting impression that can make it easier for your ex to actually want to reach out to you first. And then, of course, there's the advantage of you dictating the terms of talk. I'm a little bit of a control freak when it comes to this, but I like the dynamic of my clients controlling a conversation beginning and ending. So my clients get to choose when they reach out. They get to choose when it stops. They put forth an impression of confidence. Their exes look at them as more assertive. They look at you as kind of a person who knows what they want, who won't wait around for them anymore, just like an ungettable girl should be viewed. And then, of course, there's the preparation aspect. The famous saying in boxing goes, it's not the punch you see that knocks you out, it's the punch you don't see. Same principle can kind of apply to texting. Playing defense and responding to an ex's texts doesn't really give you a lot of time to prepare. If there's perhaps one advantage to texting, it's the fact that it gives you the medium to prepare. You don't have to respond immediately. You can sit back, think about what you're going to say, make yourself appear more insightful than you probably could if you were put on the spot. And I suppose someone could argue that you could still do this if your ex reached out to you first through text. You could take your time with a reply, and they are right. But my point, I think, is still valid. Based on my experience, anxious individuals who want nothing more than to rekindle things with their ex don't have a lot of patience, and they get roped into texting back as soon as possible. Here's my point. You reaching out to your ex has too many advantages to pass up. So wait, prepare, but most importantly, outgrow your ex before you reach out to them.